The boardroom smelled of leather and fear. Elena Price stood at the head of the long, gleaming table, her fingers gripping the polished oak so tightly her knuckles whitened. Across from her, a dozen executives watched with predatory interest, waiting for her to falter. At 32, she was the youngest CEO her family's multi-billion-dollar real estate empire had ever seen and the first woman. But today, the stakes were higher than ever. One wrong move in the upcoming merger could cost not only the company her late father built but the fragile thread holding her family together. And then he walked in. Lucas Reed. The rival. The man whose name had been whispered in every finance column for months. Tall, sharp-suited, and devastatingly composed, Lucas carried the quiet confidence of someone who always won. He was here to negotiate, but the spark of recognition in his dark eyes told Elena that this wasn't just business. They had a single, unforgettable night 5 years ago that neither of them had dared to revisit. Elena had never intended to fall in love. Her life was spreadsheets, 4 a.m. strategy calls, and keeping her younger brother, Ryan, out of trouble. After their father's sudden death, Ryan had turned reckless, gambling with risky investments that threatened the company's future. Elena cleaned up the messes, sacrificing friendships and any hope of romance to keep the Price legacy intact. Love, she believed, was a luxury she couldn't afford. Lucas, on the other hand, had once believed in love and paid the price. Years ago, his own family had been destroyed by a hostile takeover. He learned early that business was war, and vulnerability was fatal. He had built his investment firm from ashes, and now he was circling Price Global, ready to strike. But as he looked across the table at Elena, her steady gaze betraying the storm beneath her, he felt an old ache he thought he'd buried. The negotiations were brutal. Lucas offered terms that could save the company but would strip Elena of controlling interest. For her, it wasn't just about numbers, it was about her father's dream and the only family she had left. Night after night, they clashed in late meetings that blurred the line between rivalry and something far more dangerous. One evening, after a 12-hour standoff, Elena found herself in the rooftop garden of the Price headquarters, the city lights flickering like restless stars. Lucas appeared, silent at first, then softer than she'd ever heard him. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said. The words cracked something open in her. For the first time, she let herself breathe. And when Lucas reached for her hand, it felt less like surrender and more like finding someone who understood the weight she bore. But the closer they grew, the more the world threatened to tear them apart. Ryan's reckless investments came to light, a secret offshore deal that could bankrupt the company overnight. Elena was furious but also terrified. If the press found out, the Price name would shatter. Lucas discovered the truth first. He could have used it to win. Instead, he quietly brought her the evidence and a way to fix it, risking his own firm's reputation to protect her family. It was an act of loyalty Elena didn't expect. Yet it forced her to confront the truth. Love was not weakness. Love was strength, the kind that allowed you to face impossible odds and still choose compassion over conquest. The final showdown came at the merger vote. Elena stood before the board, her voice steady as she revealed Ryan's mistake but also the plan to recover, a plan Lucas had helped craft. The boardroom, once hostile, fell silent. Slowly, one by one, the votes turned in her favor. Price Global remained in family hands, and Lucas withdrew his bid. Later, on that same rooftop where everything had begun, Lucas found her watching the sun rise. "You didn't need saving," he said quietly. "Maybe not," Elena replied, her eyes glistening. "But it's easier to fight when someone believes in you." He stepped closer, the city awakening around them. And if I told you I want more than boardrooms and battles? Elena's heart hammered. Then I'd sigh a broken bar. It's about time. Months later, the company was thriving under Elena's leadership. Ryan had found purpose in a new, smaller venture, finally owning his mistakes. And Lucas? He was still her fiercest competitor on paper. But in life, he was her partner, her equal, the man who taught her that love could coexist with ambition. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. There were still late nights, hard decisions, and the constant hum of business risks. But there was also laughter over takeout dinners, quiet mornings before the city woke, and a bond forged not in victory, but in vulnerability. The message lingered long after the headlines faded. Love is not the enemy of ambition. Family is not a weakness. The real triumph lies in building something worth protecting it together.